we cannot scale something that doesn't work in the first place. If you wanted to fundamentally improve the ROI of your programs, the first thing that you need to do is be able to achieve an appropriate ROI, which means cutting out all the stuff that doesn't work and getting the ROI to a specific area at a lower spend. That is step one. Most marketing leaders and companies don't want to do that. What I hear as a response to that is, oh, but Chris, like, sure, your method works if we're just trying to reduce the budget, but we got to scale. We need to scale this. That's the real problem. And the reality is, if you're getting 30 cents on the dollar for every dollar you spend on marketing and you're trying to scale that, it's going to get worse as you spend more money, not better. And so we cannot scale something that doesn't work in the first place. Awesome, everyone. So looking forward to diving in. I have to say that like the podcast has been on fire recently. And I owe a lot of that to all of you who show up here, both for giving me the energy, but also for giving us all the fast feedback and the questions and things like that really help us form, the ideas, helps me form those ideas and helps us try to figure this all out together because it's not figured out yet. And that's kind of the fun part. And to me right now, it feels a lot like the early days of Demand Gen Live. There's a lot of the same people that show up here. We have focused sort of discourse now, and there's like a very clear perspective on where things are going. So just wanted to say really appreciate that. It's been a minute since I've gotten so many LinkedIn DMs coming in saying, damn, that was like the best episode I ever heard. And this Signal thing is really working for us. And how are we going to do this? And people reaching out, asking how they're going to solve it. There's a lot of engagement and momentum around here. So just want to thank you all for being in here and participating with us. Cool. So I just got off of a live event that I was doing with a company called Qualified for their pipeline summit, and a topic came up that I just wanted to expand on here, as I have sort of like my own floor to go in any direction without people asking questions. And really like the sentiment that they brought up is around the idea that we have go-to-market leaders, often marketing leaders, but it doesn't have to just be marketing, basically saying in 2024, like, our goals are unrealistic and we don't have enough budget to hit our goals. And that's the story that people are telling themselves about where they're at. And when I brought up my perspective around this, they were like taken aback, a little shocked, like, oh, like we've never heard a perspective like that before. Everyone else is like, yeah, like the budgets are too low and different things like that. So I want to share my perspective with all of you and have it be on the record, because based on the data, what I'm saying is true. Okay, so for all the marketing leaders and all the sales leaders out there listening that say we don't have enough budget, that our goals are unrealistic, what I'm telling you back is that you do have enough budget. You're just not making the budget work hard. And I'll explain this to you. When we analyze a company, there are more than 50% below the median of companies that get less than 75 cents on the dollar for every dollar they spend on marketing. So if they spend $10 million on marketing, they would close $7.5 million in net new ARR. Then they'd have to spend $15 million on sales and $2.5 million on SDRs. And all of a sudden, they're spending $30 million to get $7.5 million in revenue, which is a fundamentally untenable return on investment. However, like now they're saying, oh, our budget needs to be taken down from marketing budget from 10 million to 7.5 million. And therefore, we're not going to have enough budget to hit that because we can't maintain the same shitty ROI when we have less budget. And so what you need to understand as a marketing leader, the first thing to measure is what are the leading and lagging indicators of ROI on our investment. That means in period, we spent this much money on marketing and we got this much money back in pipeline. And that will then have a ratio such as we got $2 in pipeline for every dollar that we spent on marketing. There's some good companies will get $10 in pipeline for every dollar that they spend on marketing. You'll have a ratio of pipeline to spend. And then you'll have a lagging metric, which is how much you spent on marketing and then how much revenue you actually closed. And so many companies will spend $1 on marketing and get 50 cents back in revenue or something like that. And inside of those different dimensions, what you'll realize, let's just pretend that you spend $1 in marketing, you get $2 in pipeline. What to realize is that some of the investments that you have in marketing produce $20 in pipeline for every dollar spent, and other investments in marketing produce effectively $0 in pipeline for every dollar that you spend. And it's not like just one blended figure, that every single investment can be looked at and having at least an estimated level of ROI. Many of the marketing investments that go out there can be measured on a direct ROI because they're used to create a signal. And so if you wanted to fundamentally improve the ROI of your programs, the first thing that you need to do is be able to achieve an appropriate ROI, which means cutting out all the stuff that doesn't work and getting the ROI to a specific area at a lower spend. That is step one. Most marketing leaders and companies don't want to do that. What I hear as a response to that is, oh, but Chris, like, sure, your method works if we're just trying to reduce the budget, but we got to scale. We need to scale this. That's the real problem. And the reality is, if you're getting 30 cents on the dollar for every dollar you spend on marketing and you're trying to scale that, it's going to get fucking worse as you spend more money, not better. And so we cannot scale something that doesn't work in the first place. See what I mean? And so the first step is then aligning, saying, this is the current ROI that we get on pipeline and revenue, and this is where we need to be, and this is the gap. And then you identify what the gap is, which means there's this much gap of money that we're spending on shit that doesn't work. If it worked, we'd have a better ROI. Okay, so now we have to go and find and look in our data with that context and find all the places where we spend money that isn't delivering that ROI and cut them out. And then we need to prove to ourselves over the next 6 to 12 months. I'm looking at 2024 as a setup year, and I think a lot of companies should be looking at it. Sure, we're getting improvements in the economy. Sure, interest rates are declining, or they're cutting down interest rates. Things are getting better, but it's happening slow. And so to treat 2024 in your go-to-market as a setup year so that when 2025 happens and we actually have economic acceleration, that you have all the pieces in place to really move. That's how I'm thinking about it with all of my businesses right now. And so to treat 2024 as that year that says last year in 2023, we got 50 cents on the dollar for every dollar we spent on marketing, which means we have a 4-year CAC payback across our entire go-to-market on average, and say that entering 2025, we want that number to be 30 months. We want to cut our CAC payback by almost 50% through 2024, where you don't have to get all the way there by cost cutting, but cost cutting has to happen first. It's not like you have to go lay off people. There's a fuckload of program money that gets wasted that's clear, and that's the first place to go look, all the different program dollars. And then you take it from 50 cents through methodical decreases of things that don't work. All of a sudden, now you're at $1.20. Then you take some of the money that you were wasting and you put it on things that work better that you're already doing. So it's not like you're launching a new program like a podcast. You're just putting more money and effort and focus on things that already work for you. And then all of a sudden you're at $1.50 in revenue for every dollar you spend on marketing. And then you're at the point in 2025 where you start to put on new programs and scale. There's a process to it. You don't just take a bad ROI and scale it. And you could look at it at a channel level. You can't take a bad ROI on Google ads and scale it, which many companies try to do, thinking that if they spend 10x more money, they're going to get 10x the return, which never happens. And you can look at it at the macro level blended, where if you have a bad ROI on your entire go-to-market investment right now, which we measure to be 36 to 48 or more months in total CAC payback across the entire go-to-market, that putting more money behind it is just going to make the problem worse. And for companies right now, in the funding environment and the valuations and how investors are prioritizing, even just like solely focusing on profitability and Rule of 40, that spending more money on go-to-market and not getting an appropriate ROI is totally unacceptable. It could put you out of business. And so we need to take a step back. We need to be responsible. We need to think methodically about how we actually solve this problem. And so I feel really strongly about this point because it's super easy as a marketing leader, especially a lesser experienced one or someone that's new to the role, to get into the role and say, oh, shoot, like my budget got cut by 20%, but our goals didn't go down by 20%. I guess we're not going to hit our goals, and just mail it in for the rest of the year with that excuse. Or you could say, my budget got cut by 20%. I know that we were spending more than 20% that isn't working. I'm going to deliver a better ROI with less money because we're going to be smarter. We're going to use data. We're going to be measured. We're going to be customer centric and treat it as an advantage rather than an excuse. Great CMOs will do that. Great revenue leaders will do that. I feel really passionate about this topic because, I don't know, 10% of companies that I analyze get appropriate ROI on their marketing and go-to-market investments. Appropriate ROI, meaning less than a 24-month total CAC payback, which is still not that great. And so I think we just have a sea change in how go-to-market operates. I think it'll take a long time for executives to rewire and for finance leaders to rewire and for investors to rewire how they think about it. Investors are already rewired. They know what they're looking for. They're different. Then the companies have to then adjust to the reality of how the investors are now valuing and looking at and investing in their businesses. I think that's in process, but not there yet. I watch a lot of companies that when they're trying to lower their budget, they're just making blanket cuts across the entire go-to-market. Let's cut 20% of sales, 20% of SDRs, 20% of marketing programs, 20% of marketing headcount. It's a really terrible way to do cost cutting because you're not actually identifying the things that aren't working. And what you should do is identify the things that aren't working and then eliminate those things, not just take a blanket cut across the entire go-to-market. And so with all that said, maybe there's a topic of ROI, maybe not. It doesn't really matter to me. We can get back on signals. There's some things on content that I'll either present, later during this episode if we get to that, or I'll save it for next episode. So appreciate you all being here. This is a little bit different than the signal concept, but the signal concept really holds true to this too, because if you look at the signal view and you have the signal dimension of data, then a lot of these things become a lot more clear in how to make these decisions, which most companies don't have right now. And when you blend it with account level influenced or a W-shaped visible model or marketing mix modeling that tries to blanket it across the entire customer journey, it makes it really hard to make these types of decisions and see these insights. So let's get into it. Hopefully that sparked a couple of questions and some good discussion. Looking forward to it, everyone.
All right. We're going to wait for some people to come on live. I did get a DM about when you're talking about like the marketing ROI, are you only looking at capture demand investments to cut, or are you looking at all marketing dollars and programs in this example?
So first off, when you're making the calculation, we must look at the entire marketing investment. The technology, the headcount, the agencies, the fractionals, the W-2 employees, all the programs and investments on events, digital, anything else that's being spent, specifically with the objective of acquiring a new customer. Sure, if you want to take the 3% you spend on customer marketing and omit it, then be my guest. To acquire a new customer, and then all you're doing is comparing that investment to how much new customer pipeline was created and new customer revenue was collected to create two separate metrics. Now, when you look at how the money is being spent across that level, that 80 to 90% is spent on intent capture or lead generation to basically creating a signal that's action sales to follow up. Google ads, even event lead scans and things like that, content syndication, MQL scoring, PQL scoring, different things like that. And so a majority of the money is actually spent in this place where using signals is the best and most appropriate and most clear way to scrutinize them. And companies will spend 4, 7, 8% of their total marketing program budget on brand, PR, awareness-based LinkedIn ads, like a billboard campaign. They'll spend a little bit of money there. That stuff, like, it's just an insignificant amount of the budget when you look at the whole pie. And so I guess what I'm trying to communicate here is if you look at the whole pie, you'll see the most significant investment is specifically to trigger signals. And when we look at it that way, we should just be evaluating that in the right way, which is what was the outcome of all these signals that we spent money to create on? How was the sales productivity? What was the sales velocity? What was the ROI? How much revenue did we get back? How much pipeline? And looking at it those ways, you just see clear things that are not working and things that are. And yeah, so I guess to put it directly, you're only initially, when we do the process, we're only scrutinizing that level of investment, which is where most of the investment goes and where most of the waste is.
Hey, Chris, how's it going? This is Eli. I just have a question. So right now, within my organization, we currently, our budget is combined. So the sales and marketing budget is combined, and we just started the sales and marketing departments, right? We've been a company that has grown through acquisition, right? That's been the main strategy that they've used for growing the company. And they just invested in sales and marketing probably about a couple of years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. So the budget comes out to be like about 3% of total revenue.
On both sales and marketing?
Yes. So we're really
crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty slim. And we're talking about, the ROI right now in terms of the value that's because marketing is kind of seen as an afterthought, right? But we're looking at the formula right now. We're talking to the executive team and going over this and what this is going to provide. What type of insight is this going to provide moving forward, right? And so I posted on the chat that I was just asking about the formula that we're currently using, and if you have a specific formula that you guys use to measure overall ROI for the department.
So first, I just want to challenge the 3% because it feels totally unrealistic to me. And when I hear that number, I would assume that your founders or executive team are actually doing the selling and doing most of the marketing, and that cost isn't reflected in that amount. Do I have that right? Or
No.
What am I missing here?
Yeah. So the executive team is pretty absent when it comes down to sales and marketing. It's really just a sales team. We hired 5 sales reps, and right now we have three marketers on the marketing department. So it's
okay. So let's say 5 sales reps, 3 marketers, some programs. Let's just pretend it's $1.5 million, and then 3% of that. So you're doing like $50 million in revenue and spending 3% of revenue on sales and marketing.
Actually, we're doing over 100 million.
Okay, makes sense. And the investment's small. So, and how long have you been in business before you invested in sales? 3 years ago?
Yeah. So the new company that came out of the acquisitions started in 2012. But we've doubled. We've grown to almost 2,000 employees, and this just happened in 2019, I believe.
Is it a recurring software business model?
Service based to hospitals and health systems.
Recurring though.
Yeah, recurring. And then we have some project work, but not really. It's mostly pretty 3-year contract.
Okay. Yep. So as we peel back the layers, it's starting to become more clear. So this is good. So what I think that you should try to isolate is how much new business you close, and then compare that to how much you spend on sales and marketing total. And then if you want, you can break out marketing versus sales so you have an understanding of the allocation between those two core functions. But it's not necessary. The real number that matters is total sales and marketing investment over total net new business.
Correct. Yes. And right now we're trying to. So we're piloting an ABM program. Right. We're starting with one trigger point. We're tackling distressed hospitals, and that's where we're really going to stand up our entire go-to-market function to see how well we collaborate within, the sales, marketing, and then client success.
Yeah, and at that level of investment, you are most likely to be successful. A lot of challenges with private equity and venture funded companies is they simply just their like baseline, this is how much we should spend on sales and marketing, is just way too high and was built for an era of growth at all costs 5 years ago, not built for the world that we live in today. And they should probably spend 15 to 20% less of total revenue on sales and marketing, but it just doesn't, it's hard to happen overnight, and people's mindsets don't change on this that fast. But it's just really hard as a venture funded or private equity funded company to hit rule of 40, which means 20% growth, 20% profitability, or some form of that. When you spend 55% of revenue on sales and marketing, then you're going to spend another 25 to 35% on R&D. Then you have all the overhead costs like HR and management and things like that. And all of a sudden, you just can't get 20% EBITDA when you spend 55% of revenue on sales and marketing. So I think that, I think service-based businesses, because of the valuation multiples, the funding environment, and just the general thinking around those types of, and the margin profiles, just push those companies to spend a lot less on sales and marketing while being forced to be more innovative and more efficient, which sounds like the place where you're after. So I would say, just if you have a specific question, I'd be happy to answer, but it seems like you're on the right track here.
Yeah, no, that was pretty helpful. Thank you, Chris.
Cool. Happy to help.
All right. We've got 2 more questions lined up from the chat. So I'm going to bring on Michelle.
Hey, all right. I'm new here. Chris,
Welcome.
I DM'd you about multi-touch attribution. So anyway, so thanks for the link. This has already been great. So question, you talk about ROI on pipeline and revenue. And so we measure a lot of different things. And of course, we measure dollars spent versus dollars earned. And so when you talk about ROI on pipeline versus revenue, so for pipeline, are you referring, because that's not something I look at typically. So would I, for that, take all of the sales team's opportunities, open opportunities, and the total potential dollars, and that would be what I would stack it up against for the pipeline comparison?
Yeah, based on a specific stage that your company agrees to means qualified, which is typically like a stage 2 or stage 3 opportunity.
Okay, so it's not every opportunity, because that was my question. So not all the opportunities yet have gotten a proposal. So only when they get to a certain point is there a quote sent, and then I can pull that number. But that's the number that I would pull from at whatever the determined level is.
Yeah, ideally when there's a dollar value assigned and there's a greater than 25% win rate from that stage forward. Like, I think those are the 2 like minimum bars to get there, which effectively just filters out the early stage junk.
Yep.
And then using that as just a leading indicator, if your sales cycles are 6 months or 3 months, that you can look at this as a leading indicator. And then if you think about the investment that we spend in marketing and then sales development, those 2 investments primarily are used to create pipeline. And so therefore, we should be spending the money, and then we should be creating the pipeline, and we should be measuring how much did we spend to create it and how much did we create, which just gives you a really interesting sort of leading metric without having to wait all the way for revenue and then try to calculate it from there.
Okay. Yeah, we're switching to a lot of new tools, hopefully HubSpot. So currently we're a bit limited in how we can pull data and how we run it, because we're using all homegrown Lotus Notes applications, which are very challenging. But we're going to change a lot of things in the next year, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm really here to learn, and that's something we don't look at that I want to change.
For sure. Yeah. Having pipeline visibility as a marketing leader or even marketing individual contributor is necessary from my perspective at this point.
And last question. So getting back to that multi-touch attribution. So I'm assuming when we get HubSpot and we start changing all of this, because right now we're forced to only accredit it to one source. So whether it's trade show or email or webinar or whatever the campaign might be. And that's currently when we do dollars spent, dollars earned, that's what we're comparing it to. But with multi-touch attribution, then each touch would somehow get its rightful credit, right? When you're looking at that ROI report in that way.
For people that buy into the idea of multi-touch attribution, that's what they would do. Yes.
Right. Okay.
They would. And what usually happens is that you have an opportunity that then gets attached to an account, and then you have all the people inside of that account, and then you have all the touch points of all the people inside of the account, which could be tens, hundreds, or thousands. And then you try to spread out the ARR of that one opportunity across all or some of those touch points that happen with all the people inside of that one account. What happens? The data gets watered down. The things that have the highest volume, most touch points look like the things that are working the best. content syndication, Google Ads, SEO.
So
other things.
one more question. I lied. I do have one more. What do
Keep it
you
going.
recommend? Multi-touch attribution, first touch, last touch? What, like, from your perspective, what is
Fundamentally changing how we look at this model. So
Yeah.
We have different parts, big parts of a customer life cycle. And what happens right now is that companies try to force the entire customer life cycle into one attribution model, which is this multi-touch thing that assumes that the time sequence of trackable touch points is the best way to look at the data, which I totally disagree with. And so instead, we have core objectives that we want to achieve when we deploy investments. Firstly, we need to figure out what are the things that get our target accounts in market to buy. What are those things? Multi-touch attribution doesn't measure any of that stuff. So we need a new system. The current best system, most people don't want to hear what I have to say about this, but the best system is to go and talk to your customers, do research, run surveys, ask them questions, figure out what's working up there, because it's going to be the most accurate way for you to get that data to make decisions on how to invest. So we just need a new way to look at how do we get our target accounts in market to buy. And if you ask them, they'll tell you. Then you have, once these accounts are in market to buy, i.e. showing signals where once those signals occur, that we're going to invest human capital to then try and take that signal and convert it into a meeting and then pipeline and then revenue, that we're going to have a different way to look at that specific part of the process, which is basically we spend money to create and trigger signals. We spend money to try and capture that signal. What were the outcomes of those signals? And you can make a more direct ROI comparison for that part of the process. Then you have, once these deals are in pipeline, what are things that we can do to influence or accelerate these deals in terms of increased win rates, cross-selling to raise ACV, shortening sales cycles, or other forms of improving sales velocity? What are those things? We could fly out and have a dinner with people. We could run display ads to the buying group. We could do X, Y, and Z other things. What can we do to influence active opportunities to become closed won customers, and then measure that against improvements in sales velocity? That's where I think statistics and holdout groups and some of the things that are happening in marketing mix modeling actually have some promise. And then you have, how do we expand, like renew and expand accounts, and have a different investment strategy and different process for measurement around that specific part of the process as well. And instead of trying to take one measurement system and jam everything into it, by defining the processes clearly, by defining the purpose of the investments clearly, and then having a specific measurement system for each part of the process. That is the thing that I've been saying for 5 years that nobody wants to hear. And the people that take it and use it get massive dividends from it. But it's not what people are hearing from Forrester or Gartner, and it's not everyone thinks that the best way to measure like what tool are we going to use to measure the top of the funnel? Like, what do we need to buy? And the reality is, the best way to figure that stuff out is to go out and ask your customers and get the real answers. And then just use that as the information to say, okay, these are the influencers we're going to work with. These are the channels that we're going to publish on. This is the content and the topics that we're going to talk about, and use the customer insights to fuel that part of the strategy. To me, like, I've studied this problem more than anyone in the world over the past 7 years. Since 2017 to now, I've been obsessed with this problem. And I just gave you the best answer from the person who studied it the most, and still people don't want to hear it.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Happy to help. Great chat. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome to the live show. Thank you for jumping on. We love having new people come on and ask questions. And then we're going to go to one of our frequent visitors here, Nancy.
Good morning. Frequent is good, I guess. I'm really
It's great.
Yeah. There you go. Okay, a question for you, Chris. So you look at total marketing spend holistically, including headcount, tech stack, and obviously program things. However, typically headcounts and tech stack investments tend to be very fixed, relatively speaking, relative to campaigns and whatnot. It's fixed for a given period of time. I think most people, once they make their hiring, it takes an act of a God to nobody willy-nilly add or experiment with another hire. And I think last year was also a year where people are scrutinizing how many licenses they're going to subscribe for every tech investment they make. So if you agree that headcount and tech stack tend to be relatively fixed for a period of time, how do you actually measure or justify the ROI when you included headcount and tech stack in the equation? Or do you separate that out and calculate?
Yeah. So to clarify, we look at it in both angles. We look at it in total marketing investment that includes everything, and then we look at it just at the program level, and we look at the return on program. What that will also show you is the percentage that they spend between variable programs and what are perceived as fixed headcount and other types of investments. And what happens is that around the 2022-2023 timeframe, like maybe they were allocated, let's just say 50% headcount and 50% programs, okay? Generally. And then what happens is they're like, oh, programs are the easiest to cut. Okay, so let's just cut 30% of programs. And now all of a sudden they spend 70% on headcount and tools and 30% on programs. And the balance is way out of whack. And so eventually you got to be able to fix that. And the only fix is to either increase programs again, which is not feasible, or lower fixed costs. And so the insight is to have, as a business, to have the appropriate guardrails on the returns that come through these types of investments. And when guardrails are not achieved, that we need to be able to look at all the investments and make changes to get it back on track. It would be like if you're in Tesla's down here and they, I don't know, manufacture millions of cars a year out of this thing. And all of a sudden, like, one of the parts that's coming in for the wheel isn't working anymore. So every car that they make gets to the end and then it can't drive. And so clearly there's a part that is no longer in spec. And what can they do? They can sit there and say, oh, like, this is a fixed cost, the supply chain's in there, I guess we'll just keep manufacturing cars that don't drive. Or they can say, this is a huge problem for our business, we got to fix this or we're not going to sell any cars that can actually drive. And so I think that there's a emotional element to it for sure. Laying off people sucks. I've done it multiple times in my career. It's like the worst day as a leader. It totally sucks. What's worse than that is going out of fucking business because you have way too many people and you lose money every month. And so as a leader, there's an emotional element to it, which totally sucks. But as a leader, we are in charge of making the decisions that are best for the business. That's why we are employed. That's why we do things, even when they're hard. And so I think that, yeah, there's a balance that has to go with it. We should be looking specifically at programs and specifically at headcount and then looking at them in aggregate. And then using our best intuition, understanding of customers and the business and the goals to be able to understand what are the costs that if we need to take costs out, where the best place to get those out, not necessarily what are the easiest costs to get out, right? The easiest cost is just stop spending money on Google ads. It's the easiest thing to stop. But companies don't do it.
Right. So I get your point. However, are there a general rule of thumb that you operate with when you're trying to cut back? Is there a rule of thumb ratio that you try to keep proportional people and tech versus programs, which are easily adjustable?
I think that high performers are going to land somewhere about 35 to 40% in headcount and 60 to 65% in programs. I think that's about where a best practice will land for a mature company. An early stage company might be like with 3 employees or 10 employees might be the actual reverse. But I'm talking mature, established companies, 60% programs, 40% headcount. And then inside of the 40% headcount, I think that companies are going to be a lot smarter about how they blend W-2 resources, which are very fixed, and then fractionals, agencies, and consultants, which are much less fixed. And when you think about this concept of what I'm calling hybrid talent, the strategic integration between internal employees and external employees that leverage both of their differentiated strengths to create a much better outcome across the entire team, is that external resources have insights across hundreds of companies, have established intellectual property and processes that accelerate your process, know the things that work and don't know and where companies stumble and help you identify missteps, can identify the gap between where you are right now and where you want to be and build a plan. Those are the advantages when you think about external resources, and you have internal resources that have things that cannot be replicated by internal people: cross-functional alignment, deep understanding of the market and the customer and the company strategy, like being internally, being able to actually orchestrate a lot of those things when the people and the processes are needed. And there are core things that internal people can do that could never be replicated externally, and vice versa. And I think as companies continue to evolve, like most of the companies we work with will spend 95% on fixed W-2, 95% or more, and then 5% on agencies and consultancies. I think we'll see that blend down more to 75, 80% on W-2 and up to 25% on fractional agency consultant, simply because of the flexibility and the differentiated value that's provided there. I think that we'll see a change on that as well, to your point on those W-2 employees feeling a lot more fixed than an external resource would be.
So, Sydney, I'd like to ask another question after you give everybody else a chance to.
Let's keep going, Nancy. Yeah, let's.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
You
keep
got
going.
it, Nancy.
We got a good flow. Yeah.
Okay. You just triggered something that's been bothering me in the back of my mind, and I want to just put it out there and get your reaction.
Okay.
Right. So suddenly this marketing as a service is popping up all over the place, right? For a fixed price of $5,000, it's all you can eat. We promise 4 blog articles, this, that, and the other thing. Right? Your choice is $3,500 a month or $5,000 a month. And I look at these offerings, and my first instinct is, this kind of offering wouldn't even come to the marketplace if it weren't for the huge cost difference between somebody in India and somebody in Silicon Valley. If there's not that inherent difference in just labor cost, this concept wouldn't thrive. I just wanted to kind of get your reaction, because it directly ties back to a lot of startups are now thinking, well, shoot, why should I be saddled with paying a Silicon Valley staff of 3 when I can get unlimited staff in India for $5,000 a month?
I've recently loved comparing this debate to restaurants.
Okay.
Because in the same nice neighborhood in Manhattan, you can have like the Halal Bros street truck that's probably going to give you food poisoning for like $3 for your gyro or something. And you can have Michael Mina restaurant that's going to cost $500 per person to have like a 7, 8, 10 course meal in the same neighborhood. And certain people are going to buy from certain things based on what they want. But the thing is that they're both restaurants. They both serve food, right? And so when you think about consultants and external people, you have people out there that are promising the world by literally private labeling and white labeling, outsourcing in India to some person that's not thinking for you and not doing any of those things. And then you got a nice restaurant that puts pride in it, employs smart people, does a lot of thinking for you and things like that. And it's your choice as the consumer to decide, do you want to eat at Halal Bros or do you want to go to a Michael Mina restaurant for this thing that you're buying? And in some situations, the Halal Bros is going to be fine. And in other situations that really matter to your business, you probably don't want to buy a $3 meal. Like Hatch has who I'm involved with as a limited partner, has an incredibly smart offshoring model for video production. Their people are able to produce videos and do that stuff at 12% of the cost of a US-based employee, and they do it better, and they love the work, and they're engaged, and they're grateful to have a job that pays them $1,000 a month. Same video editor in San Francisco, asking 9 times the salary, not grateful for their job, might be working 2 jobs at once to try and hack it together, complaining, not excited. And so in certain instances, offshoring can be a great model, especially in places where there's not a lot of thinking involved and you're really outsourcing a business process, not a strategy. And I think another thing as you choose agencies and consultants and externals is to make a core decision. Are we paying these people to think for us, or are we paying these people to do stuff for us? And treat them as very different decisions that you would evaluate differently.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Interested to what you're thinking about it. Are you going to hire those people? What do you like? I'm sure you have thoughts as well.
No, I've inherited decision. I mean, I've been a CMO where prior to my arrival, they outsourced things, right? And it became just a clear body shop. It's a SEO agency, right? So that's very typical starting point. And you could just tell they had no idea what our business was. But geez, they signed up for a $5,000 plan and
Mm-hmm.
you get what you paid for. But I am, to be realistic, there is a part of me that struggles with the fact I am a fractional, right? And I do see these marketing as a service to a certain degree as competition. Obviously, the people who called me word of mouth referrals never compete me against these $5,000 organizations. But what it keeps me up at night is I do see the root cause as that of there's just a huge discrepancy in labor costs. There are lots of bright marketing consultants in Ukraine and Eastern Europe that are quite experienced, quite good at what they do, right? And their cost of living is much lower. And so they're willing to work for $5 an hour, whereas I'm based in Silicon.
You're not. Me either. Don't worry.
So I'm not sure what to do about that, but it is what it is.
So I guess you could kind of say, I don't think about it that way, but you could say I'm in the same boat as you, kind of. And the thing that I always remind myself, almost after every time that I leave a call with a customer, I think to myself, that call was way more valuable to that customer than what they pay me right now. Somebody pays me $2,000 an hour for a consulting session, and I rewrite their entire business plan in an hour. It would have taken them 12 months to try and figure out where I got to in an hour. People pay me because of the 10, 15 years that I've been in the industry, running businesses, doing the things, seeing all the experiences, putting wins on the board, helping companies get to an IPO and an exit, and that it's not about the doing. I'm trying to frame this up for people because and I tried to do it once and I missed, so let me try it again. There's two things that matter. It's doing the right things and then doing things right. There's two different things here, okay? A lot of companies, especially the ones that are focused on hiring the $5,000 marketing firm, think about doing things right and never think about whether they're doing the right things or not. And so for people that are listening, they're thinking about hiring an external firm, to use that as your first filter and say, am I hiring someone to help me figure out what are the right things to do, which requires thinking and experience and market and industry knowledge? Or am I hiring people to help us do something that we already know works right, which then requires process, cost efficiencies, and other things that matter, and then looking at those as two very different things. Nancy, you want to be in the doing things right category.
Mm-hmm.
Or you want to, actually, sorry, that was my bad. You want to be in the do the right things category. So does David, so do I. We get paid to think and give people validation on major decisions that are going to impact their business a lot, and they want an outside perspective about what's the right thing. And that one decision about, we help companies move $10 million a year in investments. I'm not over here charging $5 an hour for that. It's just clear that the value is different. So I think part of it might be your target customer. A experienced, developed company would not be comparing you to a offshoring DIY marketing agency. So it could be the customer. It could be your awareness. You said word of mouth really works for you, but other people compare you. You might need to figure out how to be more known. Could maybe help you. And then lastly, having a perspective on it. When somebody says, hey, you could ask them, I do it directly and say, hey, who are you comparing this with? And they'll tell you, some people are well, we're comparing you to an attribution vendor. Or someone will be we're comparing you to Forrester or go-to-market partners. And I can explain to them why they could use both of the thing that they're comparing are not the same, that they should use both of those things, not one or the other, and use it as a jumping off point to build trust and credibility of one. Let's look at these in the right spaces here. You're not looking at this the right way. Let me help you shift your perspective, and then realize that you could use both of these things together. So some good strategy depending on what you want. Like to build a solopreneur fractional business, you don't necessarily really need to figure that out. To build a business with employees and scale, you do definitely need to figure that part out. So it sort of depends on what you want.
So I think it's kind of funny because now I've experienced the opposite. Luckily, I did close a new customer, but this is the first time in 20 years I've ever had the new customer. It was referred to me by a placement agency. I'll have to buy $1 million professional liability and add the placement agency onto my insurance. I have never been asked to do that before, right? But it is like it's a nominal cost of doing business. They did refer and then close. Well, I closed a client, but I thought that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's tax deductible, so make sure you just track it and deduct it. And it's a cost of doing business. We have tons of insurance, cybersecurity insurance, and professional, and errors and omissions, and we have a bunch of different insurances. It costs like $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. It's not insignificant, but it's not like massive. And to play at a certain level, companies require certain levels of insurance, which are also really smart for you to have. So I think it's, I get what you're saying. When I was a consultant and I had two $5,000 a month customers, I didn't have any insurance. And so you have, the good thing is that you can make the call. You can say, okay, I'm not going to spend $1,000 a month on this insurance to get a $3,000 a month customer. This doesn't make sense to me. So if you don't want the deal or it doesn't make financial sense, then you can always say no.
All right.
Keep it going, Nancy. Love to hear about the progress. Good stuff.
Awesome. Okay, we are going to bring Chris on. He had a question about ROI, and then we have one more queued up if we can make it.
All right. Thanks, Sydney. Hey, Chris. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
My question, I think everybody's listening to this, especially the first part, was just like, yeah, like, I agree. Now I need to go figure out how to do this at my organization. And we're all coming up with lists of objections, right, that people are going to give us. And I think unless you're the, maybe global CMOs, a lot of these objections are easier to overcome, but they're still there. And so I guess my question was, what are the common objections that you're seeing, raised by your clients when you're starting these conversations off about having the ROI and budget? I can already name, I'll rattle off a few, like visibility into, finances of other departments that get into the total return conversation, cost. Sometimes if you don't own the SDR function, the cost of the SDR headcount, like all these kind of financial metrics you may not have access to. And then a little bit of Nancy's stuff, like there's some sunk cost, in headcount or infrastructure that you've got, like that's where I start off. But everybody's going to say like, oh, my situation's different. I don't think they're actually all that different. I think there's a lot of similarity here. So what are the kind of the common top 3 to 5 objections that you hear?
So I agree with you. Like, while everyone thinks that their situation is so wildly different than others, most of them are almost exactly the same. Companies, how they measure things are the same. The objections and roadblocks they run into, the metrics that they track, the results of those metrics and what they look like. There's just a lot of similarity where they waste a lot of money. There's a lot of similarities. And so the way to frame this, and I think that this has to be an executive level conversation. When I've ever tried to approach this as an individual contributor at a director level, it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked for me when I was in-house trying to do it, raise this alarm about our customer acquisition costs. And everyone's like, oh, this like director of marketing doesn't like whatever. You need to be an executive, and you need to not treat this as, oh, I'm the CMO. You need to treat this as I'm an executive on the basically an executive management person at this company. And we need to have an executive level management conversation, which is going to start with financial data. So then your CFO is going to every company tracks this, easily be able to say, this is how much of money we spent on sales and marketing. This is how much new business revenue that we closed. Here's the ratio. Like it's black and white, and it's a business level metric, not any department level metric, because a lot of different departments feed into that performance and to those costs. So you start there. And then you can easily have a conversation and you can say, okay, at the public benchmark for a CAC payback period for like the 86 SaaS companies that are public for our go-to-market style is whatever, 30 months. I don't know what the data is. I'm just giving you an example. So 30 months, okay? When we calculate ours as a private company, we're at 49 months, which means that we're 19 months over or more than 50% higher than what a public company is performing, but we want to go public in 2 years. So we have to get this thing in line over the next 2 years so that we can be a successful public company. And that's something that everybody on the executive team should be able to get on board with. It's one data point. It's a critically important data point, and it matters to everybody on the executive team and the board. So then you have that like level setting thing. Okay, so now we need to figure out how to lower CAC payback by 60% or whatever the calculation is. Okay, then the next level is how we're going to do that. And again, I think we're not at department leaders yet. We're actually looking at it as an entire go-to-market team. And then you can look into that. You can see what is the allocation between departments. If you had the data, you could say where are the big issues or where are the underinvestments across the customer lifecycle and where are we overinvested. Hint, almost every company is significantly overinvested in intent capture and pipeline conversion. Marketing dollars, SDRs, salespeople at those two parts of the process. Very underinvested in demand creation and in account expansion for that matter. So then you can look at just based on what's the allocation across the customer lifecycle, where are we overinvested, where are we underinvested? Okay, now we start getting into the department things. Let's scrutinize the things that are easy to be scrutinized, performance marketing, lead generation, all these different things that are used to create signals from the marketing department. SDR performance, return, like you could almost look at SDRs as another form of marketing program dollars and calculate that against it. And you can start to whittle down and break down where are the places where we're bleeding that we should just be able to cut blank. Like we find in every company at least 10%, but oftentimes a lot more of things that could just get cut that clearly drive no results. So I'm not sure I really covered a lot of the objections, but like that would be the process that I get to. And I really think it's philosophically thinking about it more as an executive team than as a department leader. I think that actually is the unlock. Yeah,
I agree. And I think it's the senior executive team needs to get religion on this. And, to your earlier points on the whole go-to-market motion has to be not just marketing, it's everybody, right? So
we have to rewrite the financial guardrails for software companies. Like most companies still reference financial guardrails that were published in 2018 or before that around what the numbers should be. Many software companies reference CAC payback period benchmark data that come from e-commerce direct-to-consumer companies. Totally unrelated. And so I think we need to rewrite the financial guardrails of like, hey, maybe we don't spend 50% of sales and marketing dollars, 50% of revenue on sales and marketing alone. Maybe, why isn't it 30? What about 37? Like, why 50? So I think that there's like some rewriting. What should the CAC payback period be? Right now, benchmarks are 36 months. Why is that? Because companies spend 50% of revenue on sales and marketing. If they spend 35%, it would be 22 months or 20 months. And the recognition that additional spend drives almost no incremental improvements to business performance, that's the recognition that there's always a huge bottom layer of things that are not performing that keep going because those benchmarks and the generosity of those benchmarks continue to allow companies to overspend. So I'm trying to write, I literally have some notes in here because I'm trying to figure out in my head and I'm trying to publish it about how CAC payback impacts your ability to hit Rule of 40. And I think that's what people really need to see is that when you have a 48-month CAC payback, what does that look like if you're a 100 million ARR company? What does that mean to EBITDA profile? Then how much would you have to grow in order for that to happen? And then how much would you have to spend? So I don't have it perfectly worked out, but I think that's going to be a real breakthrough for people because everyone's talking about Rule of 40, but there's not that many people talking about how to get from where you are today to there.
All right. We have a last question, but only have 2 or 3 minutes. So we could definitely save it for next time. It's from our very good friend, David. So he can kick off next time, or if you want to have a detailed
David.
conversation.
We're feeling it. Yeah, I mean, do you think we can do it in 5 or 10?
Absolutely.
10 max? Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect.
So
Okay.
I want it's kind of combining your very first opening comment, right, to do with cutting costs, being more effective, being more efficient, and I think also links to what Nancy and your conversation was about doing the right thing or doing things right.
Mhm.
So I wanted to drop another idea into the cost equation. Getting our messaging right, getting our product market fit and our ICP correct. And I mention this because I've run programs that have been fairly successful at company A, and then I try and do the same thing at company B, and I notice a different result. And what's happening is that the same motion, the same action is obviously messaged differently about different things. So when our messaging is really tight and resonates and connects, and our value prop is a good fit, right? Then our marketing becomes more effective. If our messaging is a bit weak, not quite so strong, we have to spend more money to get the same amount of input in. So I just wanted to kind of say a bit of quality can be a concern, and to invest some money on confirming that your message might be right, that your message is resonating with your intended audience, or perhaps if you've decided you want to change your audience, maybe you need to adapt your message to better fit that audience. And I just kind of wanted to throw that side of the cost, balance, fit conversation in, and perhaps get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there was a really interesting like graphic that was published that basically showed the 4 layers of go-to-market problems. Then obviously the middle layer is product, and then after that it's like strategy and messaging and POV and things like that. And then the third layer is team and data and KPIs and alignment. And then the fourth layer is tech and advertising and content and things like that. You have all these different layers. Early stage companies have issues in layer 1 and 2, product, messaging, POV, things like that. You don't get to 100 million ARR if you've not overcome those problems. Sure, the market shifts. Maybe some companies fall out of product market fit at that level, but for the most part, you make it to 100 million. You have a product that people want. You know how to message it and repeatably sell it. You know how to keep people happy, things like that. And so for mature companies, the actual issue is in layer 2, cross-functional alignment, data, KPIs is my clear perspective for a $50+ million revenue company. That's the problem. For early stage companies, it's product, messaging, and things like that. And meanwhile, every company tries to solve layer 4 with advertising and technology and things like that, which is almost never the actual problem. So I totally agree with your perspective. I also think that it's dependent on stage. And most of my work at this point is with companies that are at a stage where they're beyond level 1 and 2 issues, level 1 and 2 issues with product and messaging, which then means the core layer of problems that they face are exactly what my company's built to solve. For earlier stage companies, they should go and you should always run messaging tests and talk to customers and improve. You should always be doing that stuff. And $100 million company has a big department and strategy and product marketers and product managers and a bunch of people doing that type of work. At the early stage, for sure, what you're seeing is definitely true, because if you're a 1 million ARR company and you go and boot up 10K a month in LinkedIn ads, you're basically just playing the lottery, more or less.
Right. That's a really important perspective, is knowing what stage your company is in and how well reined in or tested your ICP and your messaging and alignments go. So the more you feel as if that's reined in, then all the things you were talking about at the top of this conversation today are exactly the right place to go. The more you're still searching, the more it's worth investing some time and energy, even though it might feel as if you think you know what it is, I guess, to just confirm that you know what it is or tweak it. Or many early stage companies are often shifting their ideal customer profile a little here, a little there, as they're trying to find their customer, which makes a lot of sense, and you should do that. But every time you shift, you may or may not, you may strengthen or weaken your overall kind of product market fit to that customer. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of drop this into the conversation, because I think, as you say, depending on the stage of the company, it might be the root of the problem rather than the spend or the headcount.
100%. Thanks for bringing that up. Messaging really and positioning really matter. Thanks for being here, David. Thanks for everyone for being here. Hope you enjoyed the episode. We're going to be back next week. I will promise, I will promise I have this graphic and diagram that has been blowing up with our customers about how to think about an overall content strategy, where most companies think about it as ad hoc, one-off type of content, and how to build it into a real machine across all three dimensions: thought leadership, product marketing, and category marketing, in a way that is sustainable and sort of always on. So I'll promise to present that next Tuesday. So everyone that wants to come check it out. I've also, like some people, we've been saying, hey, the slides are going to be available afterwards, but I'm kind of thinking maybe the slides won't be available afterwards, so that it really incentivizes people to be here. So thanks again for all your support. Love having the repeat people back and the consistent sort of conversation. So thank you everyone for being here. Look forward to seeing you again next week.